Chapter 13 Reincarnation, Dreams, and the Hidden Male and Female Within the Self. As I mentioned earlier, each person lives both male and female lives. As a rule, conscious memory of these is not retained. To prevent an over-identification of the individual with his present sex, within the male there resides an inner personification of femaleness. This personification of femaleness in the male is the true meaning of what Jung called the anima. The anima in the male is, therefore, the psychic memory and identification of all the previous female existences in which the inner self has been involved. It contains within it the knowledge of the present male's past female histories, and the intuitive understanding of all the female qualities with which the personality is innately endowed. The anima, therefore, is an important safeguard, preventing the male from over-identifying with whatever cultural male characteristics have been imposed upon him through present background, environment, and education. The anima serves not only as a personal, but as a mass civilizing influence, mellowing strongly aggressive tendencies, and serving also as a bridge both in communicating with women in a family relationship and in communication also as it is applied through the arts and verbalization. The male will often dream of himself, therefore, as a female. The particular way in which he does so can tell him much about his own reincarnational background, in which he operated as a female. Maleness and femaleness are obviously not opposites, but merging tendencies. The priestess, the mother, the young witch, the wife, and the old wise woman. These general types are archetypes, simply because they are root elements, representing symbolically the various kinds of so-called female qualities and the various kinds of female lives that have been lived by males. They have also been lived by females, of course. However, the women do not need to be reminded of their femaleness, but again, as they do not over-identify with their present sex, there is what Jung called the animus, or the hidden male within the female. Again, however, this represents the male lives with which the self has been involved: the young boy, the priest, the aggressive jungle man, and the wise old man. These are types, representing generally and symbolically past male lives lived by present women. Women, therefore, can learn much about their reincarnational past as men through studying those dreams in which these types appear, or in which they themselves appear as men. Through the anima and animus, so-called, present personalities are able to draw upon the knowledge and intuitions and background that was derived from past existences as the opposite sex. On some occasions, for example, the woman may go overboard and exaggerate female characteristics, in which case the animus, or male within, comes to her aid, bringing through dream experiences an onrush of knowledge that will result in compensating male-like reactions. The same applies to a male when he over-identifies with what he believes to be his maleness, for whatever reason. The same applies to a male when he over-identifies with what he believes to be male characteristics for whatever reason. The anima, or woman within, will rouse him to make compensating actions, causing an upsurge of intuitive abilities, bringing a creative element to offset aggressiveness. Ideally, left alone, these operations would result in a balance individually and en masse, where aggressiveness was always used creatively, as indeed it can and should be. Now, the animus and the anima are, of course, highly charged psychically, but the origin of this psychic charge and the inner fascination are the result of quite legitimate inner identification with these personified other sex characteristics. They not only have a reality in the psyche, however, but they are embedded in genetically codified data by the inner self, a genetic memory of past psychic events, transposed into the genetic memory of the very cells that compose the body. Each inner self, adopting a new body, imposes upon it and upon its entire genetic makeup memory of the past physical forms in which it has been involved. Now, the present characteristics usually overshadow the past ones. They are dominant, but the other characteristics are latent and present, built into the pattern. The physical pattern of the present body, therefore, is a genetic memory of the self's past physical forms and of their strengths and weaknesses. I will try to put this as simply as possible. There are presently invisible layers within the body, the topmost layer that you see representing, of course, the present physical form. But enmeshed within this, there are what amount to invisible layers, shadow, latent layers that represent previous physical images that have belonged to the personality. They are kept in abeyance, so to speak. They are connected electromagnetically to the atomic structure of the present body. To your way of thinking, they would be unfocused. They are a part of your psychic heritage, however. Often, you can call up a past strength of a previous body to help compensate for a present weakness. The body does not only carry memory biologically of its own past condition in this life, therefore, but indelibly with it, even physically, are the memories of the other bodies that the personality has formed in previous reincarnations. The anima and the animus are closely connected with these interior body images. These body images are highly charged psychically and also appear in the dream state. They operate as compensations and reminders to prevent you from over-identifying yourself with your present physical body. They are, of course, both male and female. When you are ill, in the dream state, you often have experiences in which you seem to be someone else with an entirely healthy body. Often, such a dream is therapeutic, and quote-unquote older reincarnational body has come to your aid, from which you draw strength through the memory of its health. Reincarnational experiences are a part of the framework of the self, a facet of the multidimensional reality of the living psyche. These experiences will, therefore, be reflected not only in the dream state, but in other layers of activity. The fabric of the present self is interwoven with these reincarnational quote-unquote pasts, and from them, the present self draws unconsciously from its own bank of personality characteristics, activities, and insights. Often, past life memories come to the surface, but are not recognized as such, since they appear in fantasy form, or are projected into art creations. Many writers of historical pieces, for example, are writing out of direct experience with those times. Such instances represent an excellent working rapport between the present self and the unconscious, which brings these memories to the surface in such a way that current life is enriched. More often than not, true awareness of the situation often becomes almost conscious, and just beneath awareness the individual knows the source of his authentic material. In dreams, this reincarnational material is likewise cast into a dramatic mold very frequently. Beneath all this, the anima and the animus work together, again not opposites, but blending characteristics. Together, of course, they represent the fount of creativity, psychically as well as physically. The anima represents the necessary initial inwardness, the brooding, caring, intuitive, inside-turning characteristics, the inward focusing from which creativity comes. The word passive is a poor one to describe the characteristics of the anima, in that it suggests a lack of motion, and this is hardly the case. It is true that the anima allows itself to be acted upon, but the motive behind this is the desire and the necessity to tune into other forces that are supremely powerful. The desire to be swept along, therefore, is as strong with the anima as the opposite desire for rest. The characteristics of the animus provide the aggressive thrust that returns the personality back outward into physical activities, triumphantly holding the products of creativity that the anima characteristics have secured. The whole self is obviously the sum of these characteristics and more. After the final reincarnation, the physical, sexual type of creativity is simply no longer needed. You do not need to reproduce physically, in other words. In simple terms, the whole self contains male and female characteristics finely tuned together, blended so that the true identity can then arise, for it cannot when one group of characteristics must be emphasized over the other group, as it must be during your present physical existence. There are many reasons why the separation has been adopted within your dimension. The reasons have to do with the particular way in which mankind has chosen to evolve and use his abilities, and I will have more to say regarding this point, but it does not belong in this chapter. The projection of the man's anima, or hidden female self, upon his relations is quite natural, and allows him not only to understand them better, but to relate with other female existences of his own. The same is true of the woman's projection of the animus upon male relatives and friends. The reality of the anima and the animus is far deeper then than Jung supposed. Symbolically speaking, the two together represent the whole self, with its diverse abilities, desires, and characteristics. Together, they act as a built-in unconscious stabilizing factor, operating behind the faces of your civilization, not only individually, but culturally. Personality as you know it cannot be understood unless the true meaning of the anima and the animus is taken into consideration. The reincarnational pattern is generally speaking an open one, in that within it there is room for diversity. Each whole self has its own individual characteristics. It can live its lives as it sees fit within the guidelines. There may be a series of male or female existences unbroken. Such a choice has some drawbacks. There are, however, no rules dictating the sexual development in varying incarnations, except that experience with both sexes must be taken on, and the various characteristics developed. This does not mean that an equal number of male and female lives must be lived. Some, for example, find it far easier to develop as one sex or the other, and will need more opportunities for experience as the sex with which they experience difficulty. The animus and the anima become even more important in these instances when a series of one-sex lives are chosen. The original pattern for the animus and anima comes from the whole self before reincarnations. The animus and the anima are born into the individual with the first physical life, and serve as an inner pattern, reminding the personality of its basic unity. Here is another reason for the strong psychic charge behind these symbols and the godlike quality that they can transmit and project. The male yearns towards the anima because it represents to the deep unconscious those other characteristics of the whole self that, on the one hand, lie latent, and that, on the other hand, struggle for release. The tension between the two leads him to temper aggressiveness with creativity, or to use aggressiveness creatively. Now, there are deep correlations between these symbols and the struggle in which mankind is involved. Your consciousness as you know it, your particular present kind of consciousness, is a statement of awareness brought about by a particular kind of tension, a specific kind of focus, arising from the true unconscious of the whole self. The true unconscious is not unconscious. Instead, it is so profoundly and unutteringly conscious that it bubbles over. The life that you know is simply one of the many areas in which it is conscious. In each facet of its consciousness, literally tremendous power and balance must be maintained to hold aloft this particular consciousness experience from all the others. Your reality exists in a particular area of activity in which aggressive qualities, thrusting outward characteristics, are supremely necessary to prevent a falling back into the infinite possibilities from which you have only lately emerged. Yet from this unconscious bed of possibilities, you derive your strength, your creativity, and the fragile yet powerful kind of individual consciousness that is your own. The two-sex division was adopted, separating and balancing these most necessary but seemingly opposing tendencies. Only beginning consciousness needs these kinds of controls. The anima and the animus, therefore, are embedded deeply with their necessary complementary but apparently opposed tendencies, and they are highly important in maintaining the very nature of your human consciousness. There is also a natural tension, then, between sexes that is based on far deeper causes than physical ones. The tension results from the nature of your consciousness that arises from the anima, but depends for its continuation upon the quote-unquote aggressiveness of the animus. I have to some extent explained the fascination that one has for the other, as resulting from the inner knowledge of the whole self that strives to attain true identity as it struggles to combine and fulfill the seemingly opposite tendencies that are a part of it. At the end of the reincarnational cycle, the whole self is far more developed than it was before. It has realized and experienced itself in a dimension of reality unknown to it earlier, and in doing so, has of course increased its being. It is not a matter then of a whole self splitting in half and then simply returning to itself.